Chapter 1. Packing Up. You don't outrun nightmares. You just grow old enough to recognize them in daylight. Imagine you're about to go on a holiday trip with 3 of your closest friends. The journey ahead is long, and you and David will have to take turns driving late into the night. Otherwise, you might end up stranded at midnight on a road with nowhere to stop. Besides the risk of wild animals lurking in the surrounding forests, stopping in a dark, deserted road could attract some unwanted attention. A road that seemed cut from another time, with turns disappearing into the fog, and a path that never truly seemed to end. Laura is my fiancée and future wife, and I were planning to spend a long weekend at Samantha's forest villa, Samantha being David's girlfriend. They wanted to hold a small celebration for their first Christmas together since they met. The villa was located in the outskirts of a town 300 miles away from us. David and I spent our teenage years in that area before heading off to our college. We grew up in that town together. But after college, we decided to move away to start our own life away from our family. Something about returning to that place, especially through that particular road, always made us avoid talking about it. Laura asked a few times why we never visited our hometown, but I had only shrugged in response. Each time, David changed the subject. To be honest, we hadn't felt any desire to go back for years, until I met Laura and settled down here. But now, thanks to Samantha's insistence, we were embarking on an exciting journey to the very place we once called home. The unpredictable weather of late December and the overwhelming holiday air traffic made flying impossible. But what was wrong with a road trip? Why did people assume I was lazy or scared just because I said I hated long drives? Laura and I had been wanting to take a trip for a while now. She always talked about the thrill of driving down long roads, but I could never bring myself to explain why I disliked remote highways. Driving through that particular road, in that region, even after all these years, still weighed heavily on me. Laura always loved hitting the open road, but I felt uneasy. I couldn't help it. Maybe I was just overly cautious. But this time, David and Samantha would be with us. They had taken plenty of trips like this before, and told us about all of them. From the breathtaking scenery to the feeling of being completely disconnected from modern life. David talked about the trip as if it would be perfect, yet sometimes, when I caught his eye, there was something there. Those brief glances, those tiny pauses, only I understood what they meant. Maybe because I felt the same way. Honestly, I could use some peace and quiet. I needed a break from my daily routine and all my responsibilities. So maybe this trip wouldn't be such a bad idea after all. I wasn't a great driver, but surely the road ahead wouldn't be bad, right? At least, that's what I kept telling myself. But that strange feeling, one that had been lurking since we first started planning the trip, just wouldn't go away. It was as if something was waiting. All those thoughts ran through my mind while David and Samantha excitedly shared their plans for the weekend. David grinned and said, "So you guys are in, right?" Laura, her eyes sparkling and her smile warm enough to melt stone, looked at me and said, "Well, why not?" I had been lost in thought, barely remembering the details of our plan, so I simply said, "Yeah, sure." But since I hated driving, I insisted we all go in one car. David laughed. "What do you think? That I drive my whole way alone? Samantha doesn't drive at all, so it'll just be you and me taking turns, just like old times." "Just like old times, huh?" I muttered. Let's go back a bit. About 5 years ago, when I was still single, David was my only ride-or-die friend. I was the quiet type, and everyone used to say that despite our differences, we balanced each other out. They weren't wrong. Without David, I wouldn't have half the experiences, good or bad, that shaped me. I would have missed out on so many fun or thrilling days. Without him, I may have been withdrawn and alone, suppressing all the energy and excitement within me. I was calm, but I had a short temper. David, on the other hand, never took life too seriously, which made for a good balance. And to be honest, without me, David might not even be here today. I know that sounds dramatic, but trust me, I mean it. 5 years ago, after graduating college, we set out on a road trip with nothing but our backpacks. For the first, and last, time, I stepped out of my comfort zone. Before that, my adventures with David had only been limited to parties and weekend hangouts. But that day, we planned something different. Something no one knew about. David decided to borrow his dad's car. You get what I mean, right? His dad was away on a business trip for a few days, So David sneaked into his father's room and took the keys from a drawer. And just like that, we embarked on the most reckless road trip of our lives. His father's car was spotless and new, gleaming under the sun. Even though I could sense a flicker of doubt in David's eyes, his childlike excitement was contagious. I got caught up in it too. That car was supposed to take us on an adventure, but I had no idea it would turn into a memory that would haunt me for years. A memory that would make my heart clench every time I heard the name of that road. David didn't have a driver's license yet, but he loved driving. And to be fair, he was better at it than I was. Still, I insisted on driving while we were in town to avoid any trouble. David argued, but I reminded him of the legal risks of driving without a license. Not wanting to hear me lecture him any further, he reluctantly agreed. We had been on the road for hours. The sunlight streaming through the trees kept us entertained, making the journey feel less grueling. We blasted music, talked about our dreams and struggles, and even joked around. At one point, David covered my eyes with his hands for a few seconds. I panicked, convinced that something terrible was about to happen. It felt like as if the road itself was warning us. But maybe that was just my imagination. After all, this was David. He always found a way to either scare me or make me laugh. Looking back now, David wasn't as reckless as he seemed. He probably did it to make me give up driving. If that was his plan, well, it worked. We entered a hush, quiet forest road, speeding along while deep in conversation when something hit the car. The sound was terrifying. It shocked us into silence. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Even the music had stopped. David sat frozen in his seat, and I stared ahead of the road, as if looking long enough would explain what had just happened. The wind rustled through the trees, and the crunching of the leaves beneath the tires grew louder and louder, matching the pounding of my heart.
The tires scream like a banshee's wail. Life flipped upside down on a shattered trail. The glass, it glitters like the stars above. We're caught in the chaos, but bound by love. We're standing here with trembling hands. Together we rise from the broken lands. Eternal souls with hearts entwined. Through the wreckage we will find our kind. The dust, it clings like a haunting ghost. Memories of silence we fear the most. Adrenaline burns in the lungs we breathe, but you held me close like you wouldn't leave. We're standing here with trembling hands. Together we rise from the broken lands. Eternal souls with hearts entwined. Through the wreckage we will find our kind. Shaking voices and a promise in the air. Through the cracks of doom we always care. Storms may break but the bond holds tight. You're my shield in the dead of night. Marks of the crash will forever stay, but the scars, they speak what words can't say. Rough times